Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is Genvièv, and you are on Genvièv TV, your channel for forensic and clinical education. So last week, we began a very new trend, or I should say this month, actually, month of June, end of May. We began a very new trend on the channel, moving away from addressing conflict resolution by very drastic approaches, which are actually shared worldwide, protecting ourselves from emotional abuse by simply fight or flight. And the gross majority of the response that we are taught is to flight, basically, to take the flight approach. And so in the last few weeks, we've developed a new approach on the series here, which is bringing a lot of joy to my heart and a lot of positive responses from everybody, is to explore another approach, keeping the ones you love close. And so we first talked about ocean medicine and resolving conflict using the negative ions that are so rich near waterfalls and water in the ocean. And then we talked about closing the gap physically, which is a methodology that I came up with following my decades of intensive combat training with special forces. And this week, we're going to talk about closing the gap emotionally. So a different approach from closing the gap physically, in the same line that I investigated with the clinical director of the trauma center, with whom I am constantly researching and exploring modalities to enhance our expertise of life in general, basically. So first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for your wonderful comments. I've never received in the history of my YouTube channel, which is it's been going on for years. I've never received so many comments as I have in the last few videos, talking about this new approach of not necessarily always fleeing, but finding ways to rebuild the peace with the ones you love, finding ways to mend relationships, and most importantly, because we're never going to change others, we can only change ourselves. And that's about finding ways to become better than we were before. And I love this. So thank you, each and every one of you, for your wonderful comments, and all of you who responded to the quiz. Roy and Marcy, thank you for your wonderful ideas and guesses about what closing the gap emotionally would be. I'd love to read your comments. Your line of thinking was actually perfectly in line with everything that we had been studying so far on the channel, by preserving our boundaries. And a lot of you talked about closing the gap emotionally, possibly meaning to end the relationship. And that would be firming the gap, that would be solidifying the gap, that would be freezing the gap, that wouldn't be closing it. So when we talk about closing the gap, it's about removing the gap between two parties and using heartfelt approaches. And even today, we're going to talk about lead FBI hostage negotiation skills that allow us to close the gap emotionally. So, you know, the FBI hostage negotiation training teaches us that there are three types of responses in human behavior. There is fight, flight, or make friend, which actually corresponds to aggressive with the fight, passive with the flight, and assertive with making friends. So now on the channel with this new chapter, I'm purposely taking a very different approach than we have all studied for so long, that's so vastly available out there. I'm taking the approach of resolving the conflict, first of all, or at least doing our best that we can with our best approaches and our most courage and intelligence to resolve the conflict before we take the drastic direction of exiting and turning off, because we can always do that. You know, we can always close relationship and go, and close relationship and go. Guess what? Conflict is part of human interactions. It's always going to be there. So if we constantly and consistently flee with each and every one of the relationship that starts to become conflictual, we're going to spend our life fleeing. There is an American psychologist, researcher, and clinician named John Gottman, which we talk about extensively at the Trauma Center, who did extensive work over the course of 4 decades on divorce prediction and marital stability. And he extensively researched the difference between the couples who stay together and those who don't. And his work demonstrates very simply that the couples who stay together are those who have the ability to repair the relationship after conflict. Because conflict is unavoidable, no matter where you are, no matter who you are and who you are interacting with, it will arise. And therefore, our skills at artfully, skillfully, intelligently, emotionally aware manners to resolve conflict has a direct result in our ability to preserve the love that we have found. If we decide this love is valuable, it brings joy to our heart, and we want to become mature and evolved, and we want to give our best to expanding ourselves, because it's really, in the end of the day, it's all about becoming better than we were before, maneuvering through life's difficulties and challenges better than we used to maneuver before, becoming more aware, becoming bigger, basically becoming larger, becoming more in line with source energy. So this week, today here, we're going to discuss closing the gap emotionally. So again, this is a technique that we have come up with. I just came up with the idea of closing the gap physically very recently based on my training with combat forces that talk about closing the gap physically, meaning getting close to the opponent so you can best make use of the force against the opponent and work with them rather than fleeing and potentially getting further harmed. So we apply that in closing the gap physically with our loved ones. And today we're going to talk about closing the gap emotionally. And that is based on 3 simple steps. Very simple steps, only 3 of them, and yet they require enormous skills. And those skills are simple. We can all have them. We can all have access to them. We can all tune into them, but a lot of us don't, because those skills are courage, maturity, and strength of character. And in times of conflict, very often, we simply do not resort to that. Let me switch screens here. Erin, hello, thank you for joining. Alan, Captain, thank you for joining. Daniele, William, hello. Thank you all for joining me. It's such a wonderful experience for me to be able to interact with all of you. So very, very special course today, closing the gap emotionally. Again, a unique technique that I am developing at this time. So those 3 skills, courage, maturity, and strength of character, when we are in conflict with someone we love, especially because they're the closest ones, so they're the ones who affect us the deepest, they're the ones who trigger us the deepest, very often we're going to react with knee-jerk reaction. We're going to become defensive, belligerent, and protective, and we're going to feel insecure about our own wounds getting triggered, and we're going to react by fighting or fleeing, fight or flight, basically. And that is not, if you think about it, that is not reflective of courage, maturity, or strength of character. That's basically coping mechanisms based on, I would say, weakness, because we're not having the courage to share our vulnerabilities. So the skills I'm going to give you today are very simple to understand, very simple to memorize, very simple to remember and apply, but they require enormous courage, maturity, and strength of character. Some qualities you will not find in everybody, some qualities you will not find in conflicts a lot of the time. So the first one, now remember, you're in a conflict with somebody you love and you're being triggered. The first one is mastering the strength to admit vulnerability when you're triggered, rather than attacking back, rather than becoming defensive and going for the offense, which is a knee-jerk reaction we've all encountered. Whether we're doing it ourselves or we're watching it being done onto us, it's something we're all familiar with. There's a conflict and we feel attacked and we attack right back. So here, mastering the strength to admit vulnerability is when something is happening that is harming you, that is triggering you, rather than going to the coping mechanism of fighting or fleeing the scene, admitting the harm. And that goes very simply, it can be just as simple as that. Ouch, that hurts. Or wow, that scares me. So you're admitting vulnerability, which is in the ancient evolution of mankind, our species, we have been bred, genetically programmed to pretend that we're larger than life and strong and indomitable and fight and flee. And that will save our lives with a predator, a bear, a cougar. And although fleeing a cougar is definitely a no-go scenario, it'll get you eaten alive. So it actually sabotages us in our interpersonal relationships. So when I'm asking you to close the gap emotionally, attempt to remember this when you're in a place of a conflict. Stop your reaction, and it's part of the DBT stop technique. Stop, pause, inhale, take a breath, observe without judgment, and proceed. And in proceeding, give a shot at this. Admit the harm. Ouch, that just hurt. Or wow, that scared me. And just stop at that and observe the response. This is a great strength. You're admitting vulnerability in the place of a conflict with an opponent in front of you, a loved one who's turned into an opponent. Admitting vulnerability, number one. This might very well change the entire dynamics of the conflict at that moment. Number two, wherever you are in the conflict, is mastering the courage to make the first step towards the other. And that takes enormous strength of character. Being the first one to step towards the other in the midst of a conflict or after a conflict and say, I'm sorry, I messed up. Even if you feel that they messed up, even if you feel that they harmed you, even if you feel that they didn't behave in the way that you wanted them to, developing the grandeur of character, the strength of character, the depth of magnificence, to be humble and to apologize, because when there's a conflict, both parties are being hurt anyways, right? So to step forth and make the first steps, it doesn't make you the weaker one, quite the opposite. You know, the bullies are always going to be right at all costs. They're always going to try to crush you and dominate you. And when you step forth and you say, I'm sorry, you become the bigger one. You become the stronger one for sure, because it takes enormous inner strength, great strength of character, to step forth in the midst or after a conflict and apologize for the conflict, no matter how you see it, and apologize for whatever you did, your part in the conflict that created a reaction. And, you know, when you think about it, when you think about parties, let's say social gatherings and events out there, where you have somebody who is always trying to impress everybody, somebody who's always pretending that they know it all and that they're the best at everything that they do, and they're always right and everybody's always wrong. Think about this situation. We've all encountered it. We've all seen it in social events, in parties, that, you know, character that is never wrong, and everybody's always wrong and they're always right and they know better than anybody. So when you take a step back and you observe, right, think about it. Does it impress you? And I'm going to switch screens here and check my screen with all of you. Mas, Daniele, thank you all for joining. Does it impress you when you have somebody who is always right and everybody else is always wrong? When you think about it and you analyze things with a distance, really, what does it say about that person? Honestly, it conveys, it's a transparent, telegraphic message, a public display of insecurity, a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of inferiority that they probably carry from the beginning of time, that is so uncomfortable for them and that is so acute that they're going to try at all costs to overcompensate and pretend that they are this larger than life character, that they are better at everything than everybody else, that they have to win at all costs, that they have to prove others wrong at all costs. It's not attractive. It's not impressive when you look at it. So do we want to be that person? And when you're stepping forward and you are offering apologies and you're offering humility, now that is fundamentally magnificent. I have often sometimes run into people who did that, watch them come forth and apologize for something that I knew that they had either no part in or very small part in, and it absolutely melts you. It absolutely creates a feeling of fundamental admiration for strength of character of that person. So what I'm offering to all of you out there is, let's practice that skill when there is a conflict. Let's practice that skill. Number one, to admit vulnerability. If you're feeling hurt, rather than bolting, rather than going on the attack, admitting the hurt, saying, wow, that hurts. Number two, after a while or at the moment, whenever you feel is appropriate, whenever you come up with that intelligence and that awareness that there is a conflict, being the first one to make a step, that places you in a position of magnificence, honestly, magnificence of character, magnificence of humility. You cannot go wrong. No matter what happens afterwards, you have done the best that you could in that situation, and you can walk with your chin held high, knowing that you are offering the best of yourself that is to be offered. And that's magnificent. So I'm encouraging all of you to try that. And number three, and that's again a hostage negotiation skill, mastering the humility to articulate your own shortcomings in the midst of a conflictual situation. They do that with hostage negotiation skills when they're talking to the terrorists, the criminals, the bank robbers. Admit your deal breaker. Admit what you believe the other party sees you as the worst possible side of you. So for instance, you could come up with, I know I'm not the best partner I could possibly be. I know I have issues. I know I have wounds. I know I have fears. I know I have insecurities. I know I don't always react in the way that I could react if I were perfect, if I were unwounded, right? Because guess what? We all do. We all have issues. We all have wounds. We all have insecurities. We all have our knee-jerk reactions. We all have our moments of less than perfect behavior, for sure. That's the truth. We all do. And accepting the fact that we are not perfect, accepting the fact that therefore neither is our partner, choosing to love ourselves and to love the other in spite of our respective issues. There's a song like this that I absolutely adore. It's by Julia Michaels. You may have heard it. I have issues. You have them too. And learning to love each other in spite of our issues. So the hostage FBI negotiation tactical skill is to eliminate the deal breakers by articulating them, verbalizing them, and then becoming quiet. Just offering your vulnerability, offering your shortcoming, making it out in the open, knowing and showing the other party that you accept responsibility as well for who you are. That will change the entire perspective and the climate of the conflict. That will facilitate trust by approaching with fundamental honesty, sincerity, and feeling of authenticity. So 3 skills, very simple, as you've seen: mastering strength to admit vulnerability, mastering the courage to make the first step and say, I'm sorry. And 3, mastering the humility to verbalize and put out there in the open an issue, a climate, a perspective that you believe is true and that you believe may be perceived by the other party. So that is, my friends, what I talked about with my concept last week, to first close the gap physically. So if you haven't seen the video, go back. It's on my YouTube channel, and that is youtube.com/Genvièv TV. When you're on it, do click subscribe. It's the red button. It's absolutely free. And what that does is it invites you in our community. It invites you to be able to comment. You do need to have an account. It's a free account with YouTube. It allows you to participate on YouTube, make your voice heard, and share your comments. And those of you who have commented on the last couple of videos, thank you. You truly make my day. You give me the fuel, the momentum, the motivation to continue sharing with all of you. So we've seen mending relationships with ocean medicine. We've seen closing the gap physically with combat skills, professional deadly forces combat skills applied in gentle tenderness in the midst of conflictual relationship to protect and preserve the one that you love. Today we're talking about closing the gap emotionally with these very powerful methodologies that are simple and yet will help you develop greater magnificence of character. The more we practice, the better we are. The more we practice humility, the more we practice making the first step toward the other, the more we practice saying I'm sorry, the more we practice not attempting to convince everybody all the time that we're the best at everything, because it's a counterproductive proposition. It just displays insecurities. The more we practice being open and honest and saying, I have issues, I apologize in advance or at the moment for my issues, the greater we become, the more skillful we become in our ability to keep the ones we love close, and therefore vastly enhance the quality of our life. Because fighting and fleeing, we can do this in our entire life, and it's going to leave a very shallow path behind us. However, finding the strength to become better, to become deeper, to become more vulnerable, and that takes strength, and to become more humble, that will create a circle of magnificence around you that will far outweigh the response you get by constantly fighting and fleeing. So try this, my friends. Don't try this on cougars and bears, because that is becoming my standard disclaimer. If you say, ouch, that hurts to a cougar, I don't think you're going to get the right response. And always, number one, of course, always consult with your licensed mental health and medical health clinical team before you follow any of my advice. I'm a forensic, board-certified, award-winning forensic and clinical hypnotherapy instructor. I'm an emergency medicine first responder. I'm a trauma survivor, a trauma researcher. My lifelong path has been to help myself and others how to rise after trauma, rebuild ourselves, and share the knowledge that we find with brain plasticity and brain rewiring to create a better life for ourselves, to thrive and create magnificent results. And so in the next videos, by the way, my friends, I'm going to talk about amazing things: repairing broken relationship with ancestral, celestial practices that come from tribal shamanic rituals from my friends of the people of the First Nation, the Moche and the Moshlet. I'm going to talk about energy work and life energy, how to repair your life force using Reiki medicine, Reiki approaches, energy medicine, life enhancing practices of the body, mind, and soul that helps us in the midst of conflict mend, blend, and repair relationships. And by the way, I'm only sharing those methodologies. That's been my lifelong MO with my clinical center here in the Pacific Northwest. In all of my life teaching others, I only share what I have practiced by myself, on myself, and with others, with my research team, because I have a very beautiful, strong research team based on so many different modalities. And we fine-tune those methodologies and approaches. And what I share with you are the ones that are consistently working. So in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to share magnificent methodologies that come from all various parts, from shamanic rituals, ancient tribal methodologies to repair broken relationships, to energy work, to heart math and heart coherence. When you think about it, in a conflict, you have a loss of coherence. When you repair your heart coherence, you're able to communicate it to the other and repair the coherence in the relationship with them. We're going to talk about transformational prayer work. I've been practicing. I'm a very, very close part of an ancient convent in the hills of the Mediterranean Sea, where I spent my little girl's times as a confirmation, communion, and retreat praying, and was so deeply touched by incredible miracles back then. I've shared that in some of my articles. One of them is called In the Palm of God. You can see that on LinkedIn. We're going to talk about the transformational work of prayer. And I'm actually going to give you one of my prayers that I've been working with that has produced incredible results in my life. We'll cover that in the next videos. Also, we're going to talk about metaphysical physics from the 1800s and the 1900s from great researchers like Émile Coué, who was a French psychologist, pharmacist, and developed incredible life-changing philosophies and approaches and methodologies. You probably have heard about him. To Dr. Joseph Murphy, to the late Florence Scovel-Shinn, great thought leaders that developed approach which we've worked with my students and literally bend realities in ways that a million physical actions would not have been able to accomplish, in ways that engaging armies of workers would not have been able to accomplish. We can. And so, ancient celestial white magic, ancient celestial prayer work, ancient tribal work. We're going to talk about all of this in the upcoming video. So make sure that you log on to my YouTube channel. Once again, youtube.com/Genvièv TV. Subscribe, because that allows you to join the community. Like the videos and comment underneath, because that allows me to see what you like and what you don't, and what you want the channel, which direction you'd like the channel to go. Share it with those you feel might benefit. What else? I am on Instagram. Oh, that's a brand new, by the way, I'm developing my Instagram page right now. At the moment, I am doing a collage, a photo montage of the best moments of my life, with the best practices that I have collected from these moments. So I'm on Instagram at Genvièv Sinclair. Join me there. Let's build this community that we already have, this army of this alliance of strength and light, sharing with one another how to become better all together. And I'm here to answer your questions. I have a forensic and clinical center here in the Northwest. I work with each and every one of you remotely via Skype, via FaceTime, via any modality that works for you. Sometimes we do phone sessions as well. It works really well. And I am here helping you learn how to develop your skills, because once you work with brain plasticity and brain rewiring, once you work with the life force, the source energy that is who you are inside of your body, operating your brain, you're able to change the response that you feel to the world around you. And by changing your response, you're changing the way that the world responds to you. So we are efficiently and effectively able, thank you for the heart, everybody, we're efficiently able to bend reality and become reality benders, become expert at designing our destiny. So thank you for joining me. This is a bit of a long video. I will stop here. Next week, or in the next few days, we will embark on yet other practices, looking at those ancestral and shamanic and tribal prayer work, spiritual approaches, energy, life force approach, metaphysical, physics, quantum physics, all of which in each and every episode will give you new skills, new, very simple approaches to change reality. And right now we are working with repairing relationships. So that's the goal of right now. Of course, all of these techniques can help you in other endeavors as well. But the goal of this chapter is you have relationships that are affected. And right now with the world economy, it's been very widely shared that relationships have become damaged. So I am here helping you repair your relationship and change that standard approach that everybody's talking about, fight and flight. Well, let's try something else. Let's try bend and blend and recover and make peace, and then absorb the love there is that's right there all around you, without constantly having to change and start anew. I think it's best to just take what you have and make the best of it. So thank you for joining me, everyone. See you soon on youtube.com/Genvièv TV. If you want to work with me also, my website is genvievhypnosis.com. You can contact me directly from there. And in the middle of the page, you'll find a way to enter your information if you'd like to receive my newsletters with all of the good tips and such. So that's at genvievhypnosis.com, and youtube.com/Genvièv TV to become a part of this beautiful community of light, of prayer, of strength, of becoming better than we ever have been before, so we can live better lives. Thank you, everybody. See you very soon. Ciao, ciao.